I'm always glad to bring you in. I'm glad to get in this final part of the show this week. And federally, that's your area of skill. You were in Parliament for, I believe it was 17 years.
That's right, Corey.
And you got the Maverick Party going. I was talking a bit about that earlier. What are we looking at in the federal scene? Like, we've got a leadership race going on right now. It's looking very likely like Mr. Poilievre is going to win it. But could he win the federal election? Will the party split if he does win it? I mean, there's a lot of questions going on. We're kind of in a period of flux.
Well, my sense, and I'd actually like to pick up on what you were just talking about before I came on your set, because it does tie in with both, I believe, Danielle Smith in Alberta and Pierre Poilievre federally. And that is that there seems to be, and you touched on it, there seems to be this new culture in our society that in order to be noticed, you have to be abrasive. I'll put it that way. And I think part of it, I was just discussing this with a good friend of mine, Dave Rutherford, last night. And I think part of that is a byproduct, if you will, of social media. It used to be back when we were young, or certainly when I was young, that these national protests were virtually all peaceable. There wasn't riots, there wasn't looting, there wasn't people harmed, but now anymore, it seems like that's where it starts off on social media. But then at some point, to be noticed for society, the citizens to pay attention to it, they have to escalate it. And unfortunately, I see at least that creeping into politics, where it seems like the people that are, right on the edge, as far as aggressiveness, are the ones that get noticed.
Yeah, well, and we see it at the left and right. We see a lot of pundits talk about we're polarized. We really are, in a way that we haven't been so much before. I mean, it's such factions. I'm over here, you're over there. I don't like you because you're over there. Well, you're an arsehole because you're over here. Yeah. I mean, there's always been a bit of that. That's nothing new. But this just seems so cut and dry now. Yeah. There isn't much of a mushy middle, and not much room for people to move to one side or another. They're too busy firing at each other.
And I've noticed it. I noticed it escalating, quite honestly, in the latter part of my career. I left Parliament in 2010, just before Stephen Harper won his majority government, and I noticed it then, being involved in the House of Commons and question period, that it was getting extremely antagonistic. It was getting in-your-face politics. There was a lack of respect, not only for people from another party and their point of view. Completely dismissing it, but even within the individual parties themselves, and certainly there was a growing disrespect for Parliament, for the institution itself. And there's a multitude of reasons for that, I believe, Corey, but it seems to me that since then, so in the next decade, say from the time I left, 2010 to what are we at, 2022, so a dozen years now, it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. And some of that, I think, is attributable to the rise of Donald Trump south of the border. He was right in your face politics. You either agreed with me or you're the enemy. And there was no room left for what I would call respectful debate.
Yeah, I mean, it really brought it up in that, again, as you said, he was one who could really grab the attention, and it worked, and it got him in as the president. But I mean, for those who opposed him, they became so mortified, and then the tone in pushing back, I mean, it
even went further,
snowballed. And it became, it seems like an ongoing madness. And I look back to example for the truckers convoy, for example. I mean, never have we seen a sitting government, when there's some sort of large protest, just immediately dismiss it, call them extreme, call them racists, call them every name in the book without any basis. I mean, this is, again, you could disagree with that protest, absolutely. There was no racial component to that thing. There was no seditionists among them, and some clown wrote something on a Facebook post, whatever. But that's the way the tone immediately goes.
Yeah.
And the media fed that, and each side just kind of, well, if you push me, I'm going to push back, and we're all losing, I think.
Well, as all too often happens in controversial issues, and let's face it, it was controversial. The whole intent for the convoy was to push back against government policy. They were opposed to the continuation of the mandates. They thought they'd outlived their usefulness, especially when it was applied to truckers. That, let's face it, I noticed on Friday was International Truckers Day, and you made reference to it, and good on you for doing that. But let's face it, a trucker spends probably 99% of his or her time alone. Like, what is the risk there of being a carrier of something like COVID? So, you really, when you look at the situation, you have to ask, what was the government trying to prove by, imposing this new mandate on the truckers? And so, people rose up and they said, this makes no sense. And as you say, they were vilified by our very own prime minister. Instead of him saying, you know what, I disagree with these people, but they have a right to disagree with their government. Mm-hmm. They have a constitutional right. So they're coming to Ottawa. I'm happy to meet with them. I'll give them 15 minutes of my valuable time when I'm not surfing. And I'll listen to their concerns.
Well, and you show some respect. You get out. I mean, I understand you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to capitulate, but you still have to respect. I mean, with even the worst of polls showed that perhaps 20% of Canadians supported that. Well, if you got that many, that's millions and millions of Canadians that you are dismissing in the worst of terms. At least, if you'd gone, you'd met with them or a couple of leaders. I understand you're not going to walk amongst them. Yeah, fair enough. But then you can turn around and say, yeah, they're crazy, but I tried sitting down with them. Yeah. And we can't reason any longer. Now we have to move. But when you dismiss them right from the first moment.
Well, even before they got there. Yeah. And you said, as you said, I mean, called them the most vile names. I mean, one of the leaders that's since been honored, I was pleased to be at a Calgary chapter of the Justice Center honoring Tamara Leach the other night. I believe it was Thursday evening. And I mean, her and her colleagues that organized that convoy were called misogynists. I mean, here's a female mother, grandmother, and a Métis of Métis heritage, and so they were calling them racist. I mean, think about this. It's absolutely ludicrous. And yet that's our prime minister doing that, and he gets away with it. That's what really annoys people, especially people like you and I that have an option of speaking out.
Well, yeah, it frustrates people though, and it can drive people on the other side to other extremes. And I mean, we've seen very vitriolic protests going after the prime minister at times, or Jagmeet Singh. Pebbles are thrown. I know people say it's minor, but no, when you're throwing things at an elected official, that's major. Yeah. Even if it's just pebbles. But that frustration keeps building, and then it drives people to feel that they're out of options, and they take more extreme, or at least more threatening poses sometimes, and it doesn't lead to a good democratic end.
And well, where does it end up? It ends up with something like what happened to Salman Rushdie the other day.
Yeah,
and I mean, nobody advocates for that type of solution to an expression of your disagreement. And it gets full circle back, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, and obviously you did as well, because you mentioned it in advance, is this new sense of aggressiveness on the part of political debate and rhetoric. And like you say, it's always been there. I mean, I participated in that. But there was an underlying respect before that people were allowed to hold a differing opinion, and I don't see that anymore from either side. You've got the extremes on the right and on the left, Corey, and those extremes are driving the debate, and they have absolutely no willingness to even listen to what the other side's point of view is.
Well, that's it. And I see we got a federal election might happen sometime, any moment now, or perhaps in 3 years. I mean, minority governments, that's our nature. But if either Liberals or Conservative win a majority, I can't see the losing side accepting it. I see mass protests coming. I see, similar to what we saw in the States, and it just, I don't want to sound too dejected. I'm hoping this goes circle and we come out of this mess somehow, but I don't know, maybe we can't do that without systematic change.
Well, of course, that's what I was advocating, continue to advocate for Western Canada. When I founded the Maverick Party along with a small group of supporters, I've since done like you are about to do, and I stepped back in mid-May and turned the party over to its new leader and the group around him. So I too, I guess you run a certain course with a certain initiative, just as you have with Triggered, and then you need to reevaluate, how much you're gaining, how much you're progressing, and so I took that step back. But I still fundamentally believe, I say I'm a slow learner. I've admitted to that. I admitted that, my 17 years in Ottawa, if it didn't teach me anything else, it taught me that the parliamentary system and the system of government, and indeed Canada's constitution, is rigged against Western Canada. So I'm a big advocate, as I know you are, in systematic change. Can that ever happen? That's up to the scholars to debate. It certainly hasn't happened in the last 150 years. So I guess we'll have to see what Canada looks like going forward. But certainly I've been advocating very strongly, and that's why I put together the Maverick Party, is to try to give Westerners their own voice, similar to what the Bloc Québécois does in Quebec.
Well, that's it. And getting a voice, getting respect. Or I mean, I think what makes people feel they have to get a little extreme too is if they feel they're out of options. They feel there's no other means to express themselves, or any way they do express themselves, they get belittled or dismissed. And the media played a large part in this too.
Absolutely.
And where I see other stuff like bureaucratic leaders, and this is, I was seeing it just when you were coming in, this ongoing fear and stress and pressure. I saw one that Dave mentioned, I believe, on the news check-in with Tam, now saying, well, we should be paying people who quarantine with monkeypox. Now, why are we quarantining people with monkeypox? We've pretty much established this doesn't transmit like COVID, by breathing on a person or whatever. It takes some closer contact and other things. Where has this gone to, where we immediately react to everything then by quarantining and having the government fill it in? But why is monkeypox? I think it said on that we got 38 people in hospital across the whole country or historically on this, and we're calling it an emergency. But the government's banging the emergency drum, the civil servants are, and the media, of course, just follows along. Everybody's scared and stressed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's most unfortunate. And, I think the big difficulty, certainly for myself, and I think for any thinking Canadian, is reflecting back over the last nearly 3 years now, coming up this winter, of COVID, did we do the right things? Certainly government and health officials were reacting as best they could. I don't think that there was nefarious intent in any of the actions that were taken. But with the ability of hindsight, 2020 hindsight, to look back and say, okay, almost 3 years later, we still don't know. I'm quadruple vaxxed. I don't know whether that was the right decision. And, I just noticed today that the CEO and president of Pfizer was just diagnosed with COVID. He's quadruple vaxxed. So obviously he came in contact and he caught it and he tested positive, and he's probably got the equivalent of a serious flu, because that's what I understand the symptoms are most of the time, unless you really are immune deficient. So 3 years later, Corey, we still don't know where this is. And, so is it wrong that Canadians question this and that there's a debate even amongst families, even amongst couples? No, of course not, because nobody has all the answers.
Well, and a lot of the pressure that's been coming on is just belittling people who have questions. Like the infringement on individual rights. See, this is where I know, and I haven't gotten boosters or anything, but I got the first 2 vaccinations, fine. But my problem was the coercion. That's my problem. Let people choose. If somebody chooses not to,
and respect their right to choose.
Yeah, and I think I read a column recently where the Toronto Star had a headline from somebody saying, I don't care if they catch it and die then if they choose not to get immunized, they're fools. Whoa, these are, again, we're talking about millions of people who, whether you agree with them or not, deserve some respect and personally autonomy of body.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as someone makes a statement like that, it elicits the exact same statement from the extreme on the other side that says, if people choose to take the vaccine and they die from it, well, that's their choice, And so, as we've been discussing, that ends up in sort of a them versus us.
Yeah.
That type of a debate instead of a respectful debate, which, by the way, the Maverick Party, there was some confusion about it throughout the almost 3 years now. Our position all along was respect for choice, okay? Mm-hmm. And it always struck me odd that some of the most virulent people opposed to that position are the people that are pro-choice when it comes to the abortion issue.
Yeah.
So how can you pick and choose which ones you uphold your right to choose? And then say for those, when it comes to the vaccination, well, no, you have to go with the way I believe, whether it's opposed to the vaccine or in favor of it.
Well, and supporting the coercion again too, right? You were never forced. Okay, come on, guys. That's what gets me. If you took a woman and said, okay, we're not going to force you to do anything, but if you choose to get an abortion, we will fire you from your job. We'll stop you from traveling. We'll stop you from visiting family members. We won't let you into certain businesses.
You can't get on an airplane.
That would be in court so fast.
Yeah,
exactly. It wouldn't even be conceivable. I mean, the coercion would be well beyond the pale of even acceptable. But when it came to something as personal as medication, apparently that was acceptable. And the people who chose not to, for whatever their reasons were not respected.
Well, you have to go back to the beginning and look at the arguments why the government supposedly brought this very forceful process into place, where they were effectively going to force people. They can call it whatever they want. And it was supposedly to protect the most vulnerable in society. Well, that's very admirable. I think it's something that all of us would agree with. We don't want to see grandma and grandpa put unnecessarily at risk. But did it accomplish that? I've never seen the evidence of that. Or could there have been a better way than shutting down society, costing the Canadian economy billions and billions upon dollars? Was there a better way to protect the vulnerable? That's the question.
Let's hope we'll manage to learn something from this. And that's the biggest. So kind of ran out of time fast. It always does when you come in. And I appreciate it. You know, I'm glad you could come in this final week of the show. I'm kind of running through a lot of our regulars. I'll be talking to Drew as well, and many others, you know, as we wrap things up here. So,
well, I've enjoyed every appearance on your show, Corey. I enjoy the debate. It's always respectful, even when we differ.
Yeah, well, and you bring so much experience to the table. I do appreciate that, you know, having been in there. So we'll be talking again, and I'll be doing other stuff. We'll be doing shows, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Well, good luck with whatever you undertake in the future. I'm sure you'll do a bang-up job as you have of Triggered.
Thanks.